The closing act of the last story is brilliant, to say the least. Having already talked about Canon's Core, I sorta left out the latter half of the last story, and that's where this video is gonna pick up from. The situation regarding the Space Colony arc is dire now more than ever before. While our heroes did make it through Canon's Core, we haven't dealt with the problem just yet, and this leads Amy to beg Shadow for one more opportunity to save the planet. There's a level of melancholy acceptance when it comes to Shadow, a guy who is just there to spectate the destruction of the world because that's what he was meant to do. In his mind, it's pointless to even lift a finger to save the world because ultimately it's inevitable. There's no possible way to save them. Amy, however, is begging to differ. Even though she doesn't explicitly say that Supersonic is a viable solution if need be, it's through her hope and faith in Sonic and everyone else that guides her towards this idea. Amy's speech doesn't shy away from the fact that there are some bad people on Earth, selfish, inconsiderate, rude people. But she does acknowledge the fact that, on the flip side, there are good people too. People who persevere through some of life's worst offerings and make it out on the other side, having done their best the entire way through. Making the argument that those people, even with the bad people, are still worth the effort to protect. Even in Maria's last words, she mimics the same sentiment, saying that even if she got shot by a human being, there are good people that are worth protecting. And she asks Shadow one last favor, to ensure that that is carried out, that those people are protected and unharmed, that they have the right to live their lives to the greatest capacity they can. Even in the face of death, Maria went out believing in a faith that humanity was worth saving. Shadow is finally free from the shackles and blinders of pure vengeance. He now has a task he needs to fulfill for his beloved and fallen friend. This entire cutscene is vital to the ending of the story. It reinstills Shadow's true purpose. Not necessarily the purpose he was born with, but the purpose he chose to adhere to. It was established pretty early on in the game that Shadow is not as evil as he comes off as, but here is where he is given an infinite amount of greater depth than we've ever seen with any character in the Sonic universe, ever. While obsessed with Sonic, this version of Amy is great. This is an Amy who cares deeply for everything and everyone around her, and it's a shame that we departed from this for so long after this game. However you may view Amy now, in retrospect, we had a good character before we realized we did. But this video is not to take a look at Amy. As much as I do like her character here, this is all about Shadow. This is his act now. But for what it's worth, the Hedgehog does an amazing job at creating this interesting narrative that allows us to see a character with a different microscope for a change. While we love our other characters, when we boil it down, Sonic is just cocky but fast, Tails is handy but mechanical, Knuckles is gullible but really strong. While those characters are interesting in their own rights, they're interesting in practice. Shadow, like everyone else, is interesting in practice, but the difference here is that he has a deep-rooted narrative to him that nobody else can boast. Shadow's unique, creative, an entirely different taste of character, and that's what makes him such a standout character in Adventure 2. Now, cut to Sonic and Knuckles' POV, and we are advancing towards the, as I would call it, the anti-shrine for the Chaos Emeralds. Except, there's a problem. The Biolizard, aka the prototype of Shadow the Hedgehog, the one who came before his creation. Biolizard is not just a prototype. It's a representation of the ghost that lingers in Shadow's past. This is the anger, resentment, and bitterness he felt towards the world wrapped up into one. Once he's able to overcome this ghost, then he can begin to fulfill Maria's wish. While some may argue, I do believe that the Biolizard is likely the hardest boss in Sonic Adventure 2, and I find that thematically appropriate. And not just because it's the penultimate boss, but because it represents the sheer amount of effort it takes for somebody to overcome their demons. I understand that connection is very likely a stretch, and I'm sure it wasn't accounted for when designing the Biolizard as a boss fight, but either way, I think my point stands. It's convenient that this boss works out to be the hardest because it feels like, from a mental anguishing level, it's meant to be the hardest. With every other boss fight, it's just been about stopping X from doing Y. But in this case, it's stopping a creature A, to save the world for your fallen friend, and B, to get rid of those things that were holding you back. You are your own person. You are not a puppet of your emotions. And that's why this fight is so important for Shadow. Even the music during this fight exemplifies that perfectly. Supporting Me is known for being one of the most loved songs in Sonic Adventure 2, right up there with Crush 40's Live and Learn. Everett Bradley absolutely kills the vocals on this one. In Adventure 2, Shadow's tracks have always had this sort of semi-diegetic aspect to them, and Supporting Me is no different, where even if Shadow can't hear the music playing, it still audibly puts into sounds exactly how Shadow feels. This is something he has to do. This is a task he has to take upon himself and complete for the sake of Maria. Biolizard isn't just a good fight in the sense of being a good penultimate boss that leads to the finale. It is a difficult fight, and it appropriately is so, but it's a deeper fight than that. And that's what makes the original Biolizard fight so stand out to all its replicas throughout history. While I do love the fight in Sonic X Shadow Generations, I'll admit it's vastly inferior to this because it doesn't hold that same meaning anymore. Because of Shadow's assistance, Sonic and Knuckles are able to clear past the Biolizard a lot more easily and are able to use the Master Emerald to try to stop the Arc. But, unfortunately, the Biolizard, as a defense mechanism, has latched onto the Arc, pulling it towards Earth anyway, so now things are more desperate than ever before. Having learned this, Knuckles is sort of panicking. You can hear it in his voice as he calls upon Sonic, almost begging for a solution even if he's not saying the words.
Sonic!
With the 7 emeralds in one place, Sonic knows exactly what he must do, but Shadow opts in to join as well, which leads us to our final scene before the fight. If there was one great way to bring an end to Sonic Adventure 2, from a gameplay standpoint, this would be it. The entire game had been playing to the tune of duality from start to finish. Eggman vs. Tails, Rouge vs. Knuckles, and Sonic vs. Shadow. And now, in its absolute final act, now Sonic and Shadow come together. That is poetic, and I love it, no matter how simple it actually is. Of course, this leads us to our final fight, against the Finalhazard. Of course, it's just Biolizard at the end of the day, but the name change is kind of cool. What's important here is that now we are seeing the full scope of what's actually taking place. If you wait until the end of the fight, you see that you're beginning to combust as you re-enter the atmosphere. It's quite a tense fight if you're not good at it. But the unfortunate thing is it does lose a little bit of tension because the fight is really easy. Now, I understand that supersonic fights are supposed to be spectacle first and difficulty second, but let's be honest with ourselves, difficulty wasn't really accounted for at all here. The duality works well here, and even though Sonic and Shadow offer no differences in gameplay when you switch between them whatsoever, it's nice to see that they're able to put aside their past differences and express care towards each other, making sure that they both remain a-okay throughout the duration of this fight. As a final boss within itself, I do prefer something like Perfect Chaos to Finalhazard just because that fight feels like it has more threats than this does, but I have to admit that this fight is not bad in any way, and while I wouldn't put it on any of my top 5 lists, it's still a good and fitting way to end Sonic Adventure 2. Now, onto the cutscene that follows.
No way that's getting through!
Shadow, I beg of you,
Maria!
give them a chance to be happy.
Maria, this is what you wanted, right? This is my promise I made to you.
There is no room to debate other than accepting the fact that this cutscene is probably one of the saddest cutscenes in Sonic's history ever. Shadow's journey comes full circle here, and in the midst of his redemption arc, he dies peacefully. Shadow's sacrifice ensures that humanity lives on, that everybody can go back to being happy, living in a safe and wonderful life. But Shadow's sacrifice comes with an additional moral for people to learn. Life's not to be something that's taken for granted. You get one opportunity at this, and then that's it. Adventure 2 predates Black Knight by 8 years, but Sonic's philosophy about making the most with the limited time that one has really applies here, because humans were threatened with extinction. Humans were threatened with their very home being essentially erased from existence. So it reaffirms that everybody on the planet should live as much as they can to prosper as far as they desire and to not let limitations be their undoing. The words beautifully tragic, referring to Shadow's story, could not be emphasized enough to do the Hedgehog justice. And what comes of him in later games doesn't really have a bearing on the events in this game, and that's what makes it so powerful. The message is written in stone, it cannot be changed. What we're left with here is everyone to reflect and grieve the loss of their newfound friend, having sacrificed himself for the betterment of everyone else. It's a somber scene. It is true that some of the dialogue here is a little questionable, but the sentiment within does not change because of that. The entirety of the last story was meant to bring everyone together and to save the world. The stakes were high, and the idea was clear, but that's all it had to be. But incorporating Shadow into such a big part of it completely reinvented what a story like this could be. And it brought it to a standard that no Sonic game has been great at getting close to within some time. Shadow the Hedgehog tried to mimic some magic of Adventure 2, but fell apart as it was doing so. Unleashed also tried to do some impactful storytelling, and while a good attempt, it wasn't quite enough to reach the margin of Adventure 2. Black Knight pulled out all stops, talking about how morality was important and incentivized people to live life to the fullest because that limited time is what assigned value in the first place. In terms of how impactful it was, I would say it's on the level of Adventure 2. None of what Graf and Pontac wrote was even a tenth of the maturity of this game, so we're just going to glance over those. Ian Flynn, taking over for the writing come Frontiers, did a good job for his first attempt, but again, there was rushed storylines in that game, so a lot of those messages within didn't feel as fleshed out as they could have been. Both Black Knight and Adventure 2 are very impactful stories. They don't hold back any punches to the gut when the story earns them, and that's what makes those games so emotionally investing. I wish Sonic Team would do this more, but it makes these games more special that there's none others that are like them. Cannon's Core was not a great stage, but it wasn't enough to taint the rest of this whimsical package that the last story was. I love the conclusion to Sonic Adventure 2. I love the story of Adventure 2, period. And what you're seeing here perfectly displays that. With that said, thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care for now, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.